As a tech content creator with a primary focus on GPUs, I get a lot of questions about GPUs. And one of the more common questions I get has to do about VR gaming. And unfortunately, I've never been able to adequately answer these questions simply because I have never owned a VR headset. However, today, that all changes. This is the DPVR E4 VR headset. And I gotta be honest with you, I do like it. I think it's pretty good. It's not perfect. And we're gonna talk about the pros and cons later in today's video. Now, the E4 VR headset was sent to me for review. However, this is not a sponsored video. This is not a paid review. And so all thoughts and opinions are my own. And like I said before, I will have a pros and cons list later in the video. Now, there are no sponsors of the video, but I do want to use this time to say thank you to all of my incredibly awesome and generous Patreon members. You guys keep multiplying month after month. It's insane at this point, and I'm so grateful for all of you. And I love chatting with you in the Discord. And so if you want to be part of the community, you can join the Discord for only $1, and your first 7 days are free. Links are below. The packaging of the headset is simple, clean, but effective, exactly how I like it. I would say almost everything you need is in the box, all the cables, documentation. Obviously, you're going to get the headset in the box, as well as 2 Joy-Con controllers, one for each one of your hands. But overall, it's just a couple of cables, plug and play. It's not really that complicated to set all of this up, and I was fairly impressed with the unboxing experience. Now, I did say almost everything you needed was in the box because you will need 2 AA batteries, one for each one of your controllers, and unfortunately, those batteries are not included inside the box. Now, according to the documentation that was provided to me, the original MSRP of the headset was $550. However, looking over at Amazon, I can see that it is currently selling for only $500. I do not know if this is now the official new price of the headset or if it's on a temporary sale, but you can buy it directly from Amazon, or you can buy it directly from the link that was provided to me, and I will have that link below in the description so you can check out those different sources if you're interested in purchasing this headset for yourself. Now, this headset is meant for Steam VR games, and so if you're a PC gamer, you already know and love Steam, you know how it works, and so this is going to keep you in the Steam App Store, and you don't have to worry about downloading other app stores of any kind. And so I do view that as a positive. And of course, anything within Steam that is Steam VR compatible will be compatible with this headset. And out of all the testing I did, I didn't run into any issues with compatibility or anything like that. And now, talking about VR games, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to put on the VR headset and we're going to visit the world of Half-Life Alyx. We're going to become Batman in Batman VR. We're going to fight off some zombies and contractors, as well as fight off some skeletons in Undead Citadel. We're going to talk about the gaming performance with the RTX 4090 and the Intel 14700K. We're going to talk more about some of the pros and cons of the headset itself and overall my experience with VR gaming, because I'm going to be honest, this is basically my first ever full-fledged VR experience. Yes, I have very briefly used other VR headsets in passing. Oh, I'm at a bowling alley and they got an arcade and there's a VR headset. Put it on for 2 seconds and see how it feels. But that's not a true experience, right? But this time I went all in. I've had the headset now for a couple of months, and I've been able to use it quite extensively on a wide variety of games. And so I feel like my opinion now is fairly well-rounded. With that being said, I am a noob when it comes to VR gaming. There's a lot I still don't fully understand. I have not been able to try all the other headsets out there, and therefore I won't be able to give you a full hands-on comparison between other headsets. All I can tell you is my experience with this specific headset, the DPVR E4. And now, speaking of the headset, let's talk more about the technical specifications and main selling points. As you can see, they are advertising a 120 hertz display. I can confirm it does in fact do 120 hertz. It has a 116-degree field of view. It only weighs 280 grams without the head strap, and it has 6 degrees of freedom. Now, the other thing they're claiming about this headset is that it actually shares the same screen as the Quest 2, but it has a larger field of view. And when compared to the Pico 4, it has no latency and it's more stable. I don't know exactly what they mean by that, but that's what they're claiming here. So if you have a Pico 4, let me know in the comment section below if it's stable for you or not. And as you can see here, I was provided with a chart comparing the DPVR E4 to other VR headsets out there. Obviously, this is not an all-encompassing list, as Valve's index is not on here, as well as the Quest 3 is also not on here. And I'm sure there's probably some other headsets that are also not on here as well. But as you can see, for the headsets that are provided here, the DPVR does in fact have the highest refresh rate and the largest field of view, and it weighs the lightest at 280 grams without the head strap. strap. But the thing I really want to point out is that it's actually using a DisplayPort 1.4 connection as opposed to a USB Type-C. And I believe that's how they're able to accomplish this 120 hertz display, because it plugged right into the back of my RTX 4090. And so in order to get the headset up and running, I did have to install the software for the headset to my desktop, which is DPVR Assistant 4. Now, this software downloaded very fast and it installed quickly, and it was incredibly easy to use. It walked me through the entire setup process and told me everything that I needed to do. And in addition to that, this is where I was able to pick my refresh rate, and it gave me a few different options. Obviously, I'm going to roll with 120 hertz because it is one of the main selling points of the headset, and also 120 hertz is way better than 90 or 70 or anything else. And I'm also using an RTX 4090, so I really want to push it to the limit if I can. In addition to that, the software itself also supports a light and a dark mode, so for dark mode users out there, you definitely have that as an option with this. So I thought that was a pretty nice touch. And lastly, one of my favorite parts of this headset by far is the flip up design. You don't have to take the whole headset off anytime you need to look around your actual surroundings and see what's going on. You can just simply flip up the visor, look around, and then flip it right back down, and I absolutely love that. But okay, that's enough about the headset itself. Let's talk about gaming, VR gaming. Let's talk about how well the 4090 can handle VR games, and let's actually play some games. So this is how it's going to work. I'm going to show gameplay on the screen. You'll see me in one of the corners actually using the headset itself, and then you'll also see some performance metrics on the screen as well, showcasing the frame rate and all the other stats. Now, what is pretty cool about the DPVR software is that it does automatically provide you with performance tracking in terms of frame rate. And so I'm targeting 120 hertz, and it knows that, and it will show that, and it will show how close you're getting to it. But that's about all it shows. But you know, here on the channel, we actually look at a lot more than just frame rate itself. We look at temperatures and utilization and things of that nature. And so I downloaded another application from Steam called FPS VR. And so that actually gives me a lot more performance tracking. And so you'll also see that on the screen itself. And so unfortunately, this is not just raw gameplay, but I do think it's important here to see the performance numbers, the gameplay, as well as me actually using the headset itself. So you see a little bit of everything, because after all, that's what we're talking about, is a little bit of everything. And right off the bat, we're starting off with Half-Life Alyx. Here are the gameplay settings I'm using. So the resolution is 3580 by 3580 for all games. But for Half-Life Alyx specifically, I am using the high fidelity preset. Half-Life Alyx is officially the first VR game ever to actually make me want to go buy a VR headset. Now, I typically never buy a system of any kind simply just to play one video game, but I will tell you this, Half-Life Alyx brought me very close to actually doing that. This game is incredible. The graphical fidelity is top notch, the game is beautiful, and the environmental physics are out of this world. I could not believe what I was experiencing whenever I was playing the game. The blue lines you're seeing here are entirely my fault. I did not map out my game area wide enough, and so that's entirely on me. I think later on I did go and remap it just so I would not keep experiencing that. But this is the very first section of the game. It's the first thing you experience as soon as you load into Half-Life Alyx, and already I was absolutely blown away by what I was seeing. But as you can see from a performance standpoint, we're averaging about 117 FPS. Most of the time we're closer to 120 FPS. Our GPU temperature is around 55C. Our CPU temperature is around 55C. And our utilization on the GPU is a little bit above 80%, and our utilization on the CPU is around 20 to 21%, give or take. And as for our video memory, or VRAM, as you can see, we're pulling in about 18 gigabytes out of the 24 gigabytes we have available on the RTX 4090. Half-Life Alyx definitely demands a lot of VRAM, so you're not going to be running this game with high fidelity on an 8 gigabyte GPU or anything like that. But again, this is the opening section of the game, so let's jump around a little bit and see if our performance changes in other sections of the game. And here we are just a few moments later, and as you can see, the VRAM has already shot up from 18 gigabytes to 20.9 gigabytes. So just under 21 gigabytes of VRAM is being required here. Our GPU temperature and utilization is about the same, but our CPU temperature and utilization both have increased. We are now hovering closer to about 60C on the CPU temperature, and our CPU utilization is above 20% now. now, sometimes even hitting 30%. And this is exactly why I invested in another tool for monitoring the performance, because as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, that number has been sitting at 88 and not moving at all for quite some time now. Whereas now we can actually see a more accurate measurement by using this other tool called FPS VR. And so if you're a VR gamer and you're looking to monitor your performance, I would definitely recommend the FPS VR tool located in the Steam store. So definitely check that out. But I think that's about it for Half-Life Alyx. The visuals are awesome. It definitely requires some beefy hardware. The 4090 does seem to be doing a great job. While our average is not at 120 FPS, it's awfully close. Right now we're sitting at 118 FPS. Our frame time graph is looking incredible. And so overall, this is a phenomenal gaming experience. The headset held up well, but now it's time to move on to another game. Next up, we have Undead Citadel. Once again, the resolution is 3580 by 3580. Here's all the information and the settings that I was using for this gameplay. All right, so Undead Citadel. I don't think I've ever heard of this game until I started looking for games to play while doing this video. And this is technically the demo, not the full game itself. I'm sure the full game itself may have more features and stuff like that, but the performance should be about the same. And if I'm wrong on that, let me know in the comments below. But this is another clear example as to why I wanted a separate tool for being able to measure the frame rate and things of that nature, because you can see there is a clear difference between what the tool in the bottom left-hand corner is saying directly from the DPVR software versus what FPS VR is telling me up top. And as you can see, our average frame rate is about 95 to 96 FPS, but we are actively over 100 FPS most of the time. Our frame time graph could be a little bit better. We do have some green, but we also got a lot of yellow mixed in there. Our GPU temperature is around 59C, 60C. Our usage is around 92, 94%. So that's really good because you want as much usage as possible, but that also tells me that this game is definitely a little bit more demanding. On the GPU VRAM side of things, we're only pulling in just a little bit over 10 gigabytes of VRAM, so that's actually not too bad. And our CPU temperature is staying between 55 to 60C, and our overall CPU utilization is around 25%, and our overall system memory is about 13.6 to 13.7 gigabytes. And so this game is definitely a little bit more on the demanding side of things, but overall it's handling quite well with the RTX 4090 and the Intel 14700K. And overall, I did have a good time playing this game, and I do recommend checking out the demo. However, it wasn't enough to convince me to buy the full game, but that's just me. Maybe your opinion is different. Let me know in the comments section below. But now let's move on to Batman VR. Next up is Batman VR. Once again, the resolution is 3580 by 3580. And as for graphical options, I didn't see any of the normal stuff like high fidelity, texture resolution, or ultra. I just saw the information you are seeing on the screen right now. This is what I saw under the graphics options. For whatever that's worth to you, there you go. All right, Batman VR. Let me tell you something about this game. I am a die-hard Batman fan. Specifically, I love the Arkham games. And so when this game was first announced many years ago, it was another one of those games where I thought to myself, you know, I really wish I could play that, but there's no way I'm buying a VR headset to play it. It was completely different from Half-Life Alyx, where Half-Life Alyx actually made me want to go buy a VR headset, and I almost did. This was one of those games where I said to myself, I love Batman, I love the Arkham series. This is definitely something I want to get my hands on and I want to play. You have Kevin Conroy as Batman, you have Mark Hamill as the Joker. I mean, these are the legends, right? I mean, this is what you want in anything Batman related. And so now I'm happy I was finally able to actually try this game. It was actually the first game that came to my mind simply because I knew it would be cheap. I paid $3 for this game, and that is a huge benefit about VR gaming, is that you can actually find a lot of gems like this for about $3. Now, anyway, with all that being said, as you can see, our FPS right now is sitting at 120 FPS. Our average is around 111 to 112 FPS. Our GPU is staying super cold at 41 to 42C with only 44% utilization. Our CPU temperature is all up and down in the 50s, and our CPU utilization is around 16%. Overall, this is just a phenomenal experience. I mean, the little boy inside of me was like, oh my goodness, I'm becoming Batman, because this is the closest I think I'll ever probably get to actually being Batman. And when you're in VR, it does something to your brain, and you actually think you're in that environment for a second, even though you can't feel anything. You're so close to it. You feel like you can touch it, even though you really can't. So this was definitely a surreal moment for me, putting on the cowl and grabbing the bat suit and putting on the gloves and all of that stuff. So needless to say here, the game runs incredibly well. It's a little bit of an older VR title at this point, so it's not like it's all that demanding. You can see our frame time graph here is pretty much green all the way through, and the hardware is not really being taxed at all here. I mean, we are at 120 almost the entire time. Even our average frame rate has risen up from 111 FPS to 114 FPS. And so overall, the hardware is just absolutely destroying this game. So this is a game that is very creative. It's fun. It's immersive. It's cheap. And you don't actually need the most powerful hardware to run it. Overall, on the GPU memory or the VRAM, we're only pulling in about 11 gigabytes of VRAM. And in terms of overall system memory, we're also at around 11 gigabytes of system memory. So again, not that demanding, but still something to keep in mind. You probably don't want to use an 8 gigabyte GPU for VR gaming in general. Now, real fast, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit to a little bit further on in the game. I want to get outside that opening sequence just to show you that the hardware is still performing quite well. We are averaging around 113 FPS. We have a few frame dips here and there. You saw we actually fell below 110 FPS very briefly there, but now things are starting to stabilize a little bit more, and we're getting back to where we were before. Our GPU temperature is still in the 40s. Our CPU temperature is still in the 50s. The utilization is about the same on both. And so nothing overly has changed all that much. Anyway, overall, the 4090 rocks VR gaming, especially in Batman VR. And the 14700K is also doing a good job, and so is the DPVR E4 headset. Next up, we have Contractors. The resolution is once again 3580 by 3580. And here are all the graphical settings that I was using for this gameplay. Right eye display is enabled. I didn't see anything for left eye display, so I'm not really sure what that means. Spectator screen is enabled. Shadow and resolution are both at high. Bloom is at low. Anti-aliasing and SSAO are also at high. Okay, so Contractors is the game I found out about that basically is its own game, but then it's also a game that has a bunch of custom games mixed in with it. So essentially you can create your own mods for it. So it has its own mod server built into it. There's no complicated mod files or anything like that. You don't have to go to any external websites. Everything is built into the game. And so right now I am literally playing Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies. This is simply a mod that is within the game. Somebody basically did a shot-for-shot remake to the best of their ability to recreate Black Ops Zombies as close as they possibly could. And this looks and feels and sounds exactly like the original Black Ops Zombies. And so I did have a lot of fun playing this. And as you can see, our frame rate is a little bit up and down at times. It's not exactly locked at 120 FPS. We have moments where we dip down to about 100 FPS, and that's about where our average is. But then we also have moments where we spike up and sit at 120 FPS for a minute there. Our GPU temperature is in the 50s, and our GPU utilization is closer to 90% most of the time, but every now and again we're dipping down to 50%. So it's definitely all over the board. Definitely not the best optimization, I would say. Our CPU temperature is sitting closer to 60C on average, and the CPU utilization is also around 16 to 17%, give or take. Our system memory is at about 13 gigabytes, and our GPU VRAM memory is about 12 gigabytes. And so overall, our frame time graph is mostly green, but every now and again we have some spikes and dips, and every now and again you'll see orange or yellow coloring in there indicating frame dips and things of that nature. But it is definitely a playable experience. It's also an enjoyable experience, and overall I did have a really good time. Now, Contractors is not just a mod game. It does have its own game modes. It does have its own zombies mode. And right here I'm playing the actual zombies mode native to Contractors. And overall the performance is about the same, give or take. You have a little bit of fluctuation, but it's mostly the same. The temperature for the GPU is still in the 50s. The VRAM did spike up a little bit. Instead of 12 gigabytes, we're sitting at 13 gigabytes, but the system memory is still sitting at 13 gigabytes, which is about where it was before. Overall, it doesn't really matter if you're playing the native zombies mode or a mod like I was. The RTX 4090 can definitely handle this game. The 14700K can handle this game. And the DPVR E4 headset can also handle this game. Okay, so VR gaming. What do I think about it? Is it worth it? And what do I think about the DPVR E4 headset? And how did the 4090 do? Well, obviously at the time of filming, which is now December 2023, the RTX 4090 is the fastest GPU on the market. And so if the 4090 can't handle it, then nothing else can. But as you saw in the gameplay, the 14700K and the 4090 handled everything totally fine. One thing that I did really learn from this experience from a GPU perspective is that VR games do require a lot of VRAM. And so if you're rocking an older GPU that only has 6 gigabytes of VRAM, 8 or or even 10 gigabytes of VRAM, then in the majority of cases, you're going to struggle or not even be able to run VR games. And in some cases, I had games using 18 to 20 gigabytes of VRAM. Yes, of course, you can always adjust settings and turn settings down and things of that nature, but it's always best if you don't have to do that, right? Now, let's talk about the DPVR E4 headset as a whole and my thoughts on that and the pros and cons. So in the pros category, I love the 120 hertz display. I currently use an LG OLED TV as my main monitor on my main setup every day, and it caps out at 120 hertz. I definitely love this number. It works out incredibly well. I highly recommend it. Obviously, if you can get a display that has more, then go for that. But in this case, 120 hertz is totally fine for the headset. It's buttery smooth. And as you saw in the comparison chart, all the other headsets that it was comparing itself to don't have 120 hertz displays. And so I can definitely say that is a huge benefit. I also really like the flip up design because it's nice not having to take off the entire headset every time you need to scratch your nose or look around in your room for something, or maybe you heard someone come down the stairs or walk in the room or something. It's nice not having to take off the entire headset. You can just simply flip it up and flip it back down, and I definitely think that was a nice touch. From an installation standpoint, a setup standpoint, and even in terms of comfortability, everything was totally fine for me, and I couldn't really imagine other headsets being that much better or faster or easier in terms of setup, installation, and overall comfortability. But comfortability is something that's a little bit more subjective, so your mileage may vary. Now, the last thing I'll say in the pro category is compatibility. It is nice that the headset does work with Steam VR games, and I can say that no matter which one of these games I attempted to run, everything was completely compatible. It just had to be available in Steam VR. And now let's talk about the cons, or the things that I perceive as cons for the headset. So first of all, I did have a little bit of light bleed, and I wasn't going to put that down as a con because I thought maybe it was just me. Maybe I didn't put it on correctly. Maybe it's my head size or something like that. But I did search on YouTube and I did find another creator who had the exact same issue. And so it's making me think that it actually might be a design flaw or just the way the headset is. Then again, you might not experience that. The light bleed for me came in right here, right above my nose and just under my eyes. And it wasn't massive or anything like that. And I was still able to enjoy the games. And again, I don't really know how other headsets do in that category, but that is something that I experienced and I wanted to provide feedback on that. The other thing that I would put in the con category is I can't stand the fact that they did not include batteries in the box. And I don't understand why. When you're talking about paying $500 to $550 for a product, the least they could do is throw in a couple of batteries that cost $2 or $3 tops to get you up and running. After all, the controllers do require batteries. There's no other alternative, and you cannot use the headset without the controllers. So essentially, unless you already have batteries on hand, you're gonna have to go buy batteries in order to get this up and running out of the box. And so that is something to be mindful of, and that was definitely a little bit of a turnoff for me. Now, the last thing I want to talk about from a con perspective is simply the price. It started off at $550, it's now at $500. That's definitely better. And to be fair, $500 is completely a fair and reasonable price when you look at the market and you compare it to the competition. The Quest 3 is currently going for $500, and the Valve Index is currently going for $500, and the PSVR 2 is currently going for $550. And so it doesn't really matter what you compare it to. $500 or $550 does in fact seem to be a fair and reasonable price for VR headsets. However, the way I look at it is, if I'm a consumer that does not know a lot about technology and I'm walking into the market, I'm going to look at the DPVR E4 and say, I have no idea what brand this is. I don't know who they are. But if I look at the PSVR 2, I recognize Sony, I recognize PlayStation. If I look at the Quest 3, I recognize Meta or previously Facebook or whatever. You have the brand recognition behind it. And even if you don't care about that stuff, you also have things like with the PSVR 2, while you don't have access to Steam VR games, you do have access to the PlayStation exclusive VR games that are not available anywhere else. And if you go with something like the Quest 3, for example, you're getting wireless capabilities and you're getting access to exclusives that are currently not available with Steam VR, and you still have access to Steam VR. And it only costs $500, which is the same price as the DPVR E4. And so for me, I'm looking at the E4 headset right now and I'm saying, look, it's a good headset. I had a good time with it. I had a lot of fun with it, and I learned so much about VR gaming, and I'm so happy that they sent it out to me for review. I'm super grateful for that. However, I have a duty to my audience, and so as a general consumer, I would say at $500, it probably isn't the best value unless there is just some type of
massive con with the Quest 3, for example, that I'm not aware of. Otherwise, I think the DPVR E4 headset should be priced at about $400. At $400, I definitely think it is a solid buy. And overall, even if you bought it at $550 or $500, or if you're planning to buy it at that, for yourself or for somebody else, I still think it's a good product, and I don't think you're going to be disappointed in it, and I don't think whoever you're giving it to would be disappointed. It's a good product. I recommend the product as a whole. I'm just saying, I think at that price point, there might be another product that has better value. But if the E4 price can come down to $4 or maybe $450, then I think it has a little bit more of a leg to stand on in terms of the pricing category. But that's just my 2 cents on it. But overall, in terms of VR gaming, I learned so much about VR gaming from doing this video. And I can definitely say, I used to think VR gaming was dying and on its way out and maybe a little bit of a gimmick, but I can definitely see where this technology is probably the future. There are so many VR games on the market right now that no one is talking about, no one knows of, and because of that, they haven't sold a lot of units. And because of that, you can get these games for super cheap. I got Batman Arkham VR for $3. Undead Citadel was a free demo. Contractors was $19 or $20. And at one point, I was even playing Zero Caliber, which did not make the cut for the video, which I only paid $11 for that. And so there are a bunch of games at cheap prices. And so I definitely think VR gaming is here to stay. And I also think it's worth investing in. So definitely check it out. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought about the video. What do you think about VR gaming in general? Do you have a headset? Would you try the DPVR E4 headset? Are you looking to get into VR gaming? If you like the video, do me a favor, hit that like button because it goes a long way in helping me out. If you're new, get subscribed. And until next time, E-Rock out.